Good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar. Today we're going to be talking about moving to managed Windows file storage on AWS. My name is Andrew Krudge. I'm a Senior Product Manager on the Amazon FSx team. So today we're going to be talking about, first, why are some of our customers interested in moving to fully managed cloud file storage on AWS? Afterwards, I'll be giving a quick overview of Amazon FSx for Windows File Server, our native Windows file system offering. Then I'll give a deep dive into the product and some of its key features and key performance attributes. Then I'll be giving a demo to show you some of these features and aspects live. And lastly, I'll be showing you some web pages that you can go to if you want to get started with the service. So first thing, why are customers looking at moving to fully managed cloud file storage? As you likely know, in your organization, files and file systems are everywhere. It's estimated that there's over hundreds of exabytes of file data out there. And it's likely that your users, your applications, even you yourselves are using files today, whether this is shared directories that your teams are accessing and using to store Office files or documents that you all rely on, or applications where you have potentially multiple nodes, multiple servers that need access to shared file data. File systems have been around for many, many years, and they're widely used across a variety of applications. And so we see a lot of our customers coming to AWS who today have on-premises file systems that they're running and that they're managing. And what customers tell us is that managing on-premises storage arrays comes with a unique set of challenges. Firstly, as storage grows, as usage grows, so do infrastructure costs. And because typically customers are purchasing file systems in a 3 to 5 year life cycle, what that means is that customers not only need to plan 3 to 5 years out, but very often they're planning for their peak usage potentially 3 years out and buying capacity that they may not necessarily need today. Secondly, with on-premises storage, you're sometimes limited to the immediate capacity you have. For example, you might have data center constraints or constraints about how much capacity you can buy at a given time, and that limits your ability to store data as well as your ability to process that data. And lastly, keeping the storage up, keeping it running, keeping it healthy to ensure that your end users and customers have continued access requires quite a bit of operational overhead, both making sure that the hardware as well as the software that's powering your file systems is up and running and serving your end users. So some of the benefits of fully managed AWS file storage offerings that we have that our customers are excited about include our offerings provide highly secure and reliable storage that's designed to be always available and accessible to your users and applications. We also offer a variety of price and performance ratios, price performance points, to allow you to meet exactly what your applications need at scale, meaning that you can scale to higher levels of performance when you need it, but you can also optimize for costs for some of your colder data that doesn't need super high levels of performance. And lastly, we have a variety of data protection, compliance, and backup features that make it easy to protect your data in the cloud. So how does AWS help with your move to a managed solution in the cloud? So one of the ways in which we help is by providing familiar tools and integrations that you can use. We have a number of services in AWS in terms of that offer storage solutions, data movement solutions, analytics solutions, and all these tools are, in addition to being standalone services that you can use, they're also broadly integrated with one another. We have a variety of storage types and protocols that we offer. We have SMB-based solutions, NFS-based solutions, meaning that the file system you're running today, you can move it to a managed file system in the cloud that offers similar performance, similar protocol as what you're running today. Our offerings are designed to offer high reliability, high durability, and also to be highly secure. As with most of our offerings, they're fully managed, which means that as a customer, you don't need to worry about managing the hardware or the software that's powering your file system. And lastly, our goal with our offerings is we want to make sure that you can reduce your costs, optimize your spend, and really focus on the key elements that drive value for your business, rather than focusing on managing hardware and managing software that's powering your file systems. So with that, I'm going to give a quick overview of Amazon FSx for Windows File Server, which is our native Windows offering. So what is Amazon FSx for Windows File Server? It's a fully managed native Windows file system that's deeply integrated with AWS. And so why is this important for customers, for users who are looking to move their current on-premises file systems to a managed solution in the cloud? Well, firstly, as a fully managed solution, what that means is when you use FSx, you no longer need to worry about managing the hardware powering your file system. So this includes planning capacity, potentially months or years in advance, procuring and purchasing hardware, setting up storage servers and volumes, detecting and addressing if there are any failures in the hardware, and investing your organization's own CapEx to purchase and run this hardware. In addition, with fully managed, you no longer need to worry about managing the software that's powering your file system. So this includes installing and configuring the software, in the case of a Windows file system, applying Windows updates, managing licensing and backups and security aspects. Both the hardware and the software aspects of running a network file system are managed by Amazon FSx. In addition to being fully managed, a key attribute and something that's very important to our customers is that the file systems they're moving to in the cloud today offer all the features that are available today with your on-premises file systems. Moving to managed for our customers means that you can move to a file system that offers the features, the performance, the reliability, all the aspects of your on-prem storage, but offering all of that as a managed solution in the cloud. And so up here we have just a few of the features that we support on Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the features we launched over the past year. But our goal, what our customers are telling us is there's so many features built into network file systems. Again, they've been around for many years. And so our goal is to deliver solutions that have all of the features, all the functionality that you rely on, so that it's easy for you to move from the file systems you have today to a fully managed file system in the cloud. So I want to touch upon some of the features that we've launched since we first launched the service back at the end of 2018. So first is, and this is especially important for customers who are moving from on-premises, we've launched support for access to file systems over Direct Connect or VPN from on-premises, as well as across VPCs and across accounts within AWS. We've also launched support for joining your file systems to shared AWS managed Active Directories, as well as joining your file systems to your own organization's Active Directory if you'd like to use your own Active Directory with your file system. And so what this allows you to do is you can have your existing AD with your existing users, your existing groups, and when you create an Amazon FSx file system, that file system will allow you to continue using your users, your groups, all of your access control lists the same way that you do on premises today. We launched support for file level restore or shadow copies, allowing end users to go back in time to previous versions of their file systems. And we also launched the ability for administrators to restore activity on files that were locked or opened by inactive users. Towards reInvent 2019, we launched a number of features, including a Multieasy deployment option with high availability and durability across availability zones. We launched support for high availability SQL Server deployments, user quotas, programmatic share management, so you can more easily create shares on your file systems, support for data deduplication, which allows you to reduce your costs up to about 50%. We launched support for encryption in transit enforcement, so if you have specific compliance requirements, and we also lowered our minimum file system size. At reInvent, we launched support for Amazon FSx in our Los Angeles local zone. Just in the past couple months, we launched an integration with AWS Data Sync, making it easier to move your data into or between FSx file systems. And lastly, coming soon, we plan to launch a low-cost HDD storage type. So beyond some of the simplicity, fully managed, and feature aspects of the product, two key attributes that our customers share are very important when they're considering a file system are price and performance. So in terms of price, today we offer two deployment options, a single-easy and a multi-easy deployment option on top of high-performance SSD-based storage. And our pricing per gigabyte per month for storage is 13 cents for single easy and 23 cents for multi-easy. As I mentioned on the previous slide, coming soon, we also will be launching a lower cost HDD-based storage offering, which is going to be about a tenth of the price as the single easy offering. So it's 1.3 cents for single easy file systems and 2.5 cents for multi-easy file systems. And these prices are all based on the US East North Virginia region. I mentioned data deduplication earlier, which is a feature that a lot of our customers are using today that allow them to reduce their costs if there's overlap in some of the files that they have in their file systems. And so typically what we see from customers is typical workloads can save about 50 to 60% on their storage costs by leveraging deduplication to deduplicate data if there's overlapping data in the file system. And so what that means is, taking a look at the numbers on the previous slide, the effective cost per gigabyte per month on FSx Windows, if you take into account deduplication, is, in the example of HDD-based storage, less than a cent, a fraction of a cent. And for multi-easy storage, it's 1.25 cents. So we want to make sure that if you're running a file system today on premises, whether your data is on SSD or HDD, you have storage types in the cloud in AWS that allow you to hit the price and performance characteristics that your workloads require. In terms of performance, with our SSD-based storage, we offer sub-millisecond latencies for file system operations, multiple gigabytes per second of throughput, and hundreds of thousands of IOPS. And this is all per file system, and you can create multiple file system per AWS account. And so with performance, we want to make sure that if you have an application today on premises that requires access for multiple users or multiple servers, that you're able to get the performance that you need out of your file system in the cloud. On the note of AWS integrations, Amazon FSx is broadly integrated with a number of services that make it easy to monitor, secure, and just simply access and use your file systems. One of the services, as I mentioned earlier, that we integrated with just a couple months ago is AWS Data Sync on the bottom right, which makes it even easier for you to move your data from on-premises or from a different file system into Amazon FSx. And I'll be demoing what Data Sync looks like in a few minutes. So all this put together, Amazon FSx for Windows File Server, it's designed for a wide spectrum of use cases. And these are the use cases that our customers are coming to us with, that are saying that they're really excited about moving these use cases to the cloud. And the key principle that all these use cases rely on is having shared Windows file storage that can be accessed across a number of nodes. So some of these use cases include home directories and user shares, line of business applications, web serving and content management. So for example, IaaS servers, media and entertainment workflows such as rendering, transcoding, backup and disaster recovery, as well as high availability SQL Server databases. And I'll touch upon the SQL Server a bit in a few minutes. So one of the things that we're really excited when we have a chance to talk to our customers is sharing some success stories and sharing what fully managed file storage ultimately means for the customers who are using our services today. So, looking at, for example, Infor. Infor said, with Amazon FSx, we have a managed solution that eliminates the need for us to manage the tasks associated with operating file storage, including performing backups and applying software patches. With Neiman Marcus, they were able to move their Windows file-based applications to AWS quickly, and that solved a critical performance issue that they were running into. Based on our successful lift and shift experience, we're looking to move more of our legacy applications requiring Windows native compatibility to Amazon FSx. And with Doxilent, they said, we no longer need to worry about maintenance of the file system environment or patching of the underlying servers. This is allowing the team to focus on more business critical parts of our application structure. So we're excited to share anecdotes such as these because they really talk to some of the benefits that our customers are seeing in the real world when they're using Amazon FSx for Windows File Server as its shared storage. So now I'm going to be going a little bit deeper into some of the aspects of Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. So as we talked about earlier, we offer two deployment options on Amazon FSx for Windows File Server, with the Multieasy deployment option launching just a few months ago. So with both deployment options, Amazon FSx is continuously monitoring and addressing hardware failures that might occur in your file system. And we're also automatically replicating the data in your file system within an availability zone. In addition, with multi-easy file systems, your data is also replicated across availability zones, and file systems are designed to automatically fail over across availability zones in the event of a failure in one of the availability zones. So what does this look like in practice? So here we have a quick diagram of an Amazon FSx multi-easy file system in the orange box on the bottom, and a customer's VPC on the top in the green box, with clients within the VPC that are mounting a file system. So in steady state, when you create a multi-easy file system, you specify a preferred availability zone, a preferred subnet. And so in this case, the preferred subnet is the subnet on the left in availability zone 1. If, for whatever reason, there's a temporary unavailability to the primary file server, within seconds, the clients mounting the file system will automatically fail over and mount the Windows file server that's in the other availability zone, so they can continue accessing the file system and performing I/O operations. Within minutes or whenever availability is restored, the original file server or a new file server will be provisioned in place of the original, and clients will automatically fail back. This happens completely transparently, completely automatically, and so you don't need to worry about managing failover, failback, configuring triggers. Windows clients are automatically designed to fail over from one file system to another. Similarly, we talked about data replication. In the unlikely event of a disk failure, Amazon FSx will automatically replace that disk, reinitiate replication, and all of this happens transparently behind the scenes, so you don't have to worry about managing the disks that are powering your file system. One of the use cases that we're really excited to be supporting, and we actually just this past week launched a blog post that talks about this in a little bit more detail, is support for running SQL Server failover cluster instance, or FCI deployments, using Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. So SQL Server failover cluster instances, it's a deployment option for SQL Server where you have multiple nodes that are part of a Windows failover cluster. And in order for the database application on those nodes to work properly, it needs access to shared storage that can be shared and accessible at the same time from all of the nodes running the database software. And so with Amazon FSx for Windows File Server, with our new multi-easy file systems, we're actually designed to be used as that shared storage layer with SQL Server FCI deployments, which means that you can easily deploy and manage a SQL Server cluster and not need to worry about managing the underlying file system or the underlying storage that's powering your database. So the other thing I wanted to touch upon when it comes to availability and durability is we offer two classes of features around recovering or restoring data in your file system. The first is we have a file level restore feature, or a shadow copy feature, that allows you to take point-in-time snapshots of the data in your file system. And what this allows you to do, as you can see on the screenshot on the right, is end users who accidentally delete or accidentally modify a file, they themselves can go in, they can right-click on a file, right-click on a folder, and view previous versions of that folder, previous versions of the file, without needing, and restore to an older version without needing to bother a storage administrator to do that on their behalf. In addition to file level restore, we have an automatic durable backup feature that allows you to back up your file systems with a click of a button. And we support a variety of data retention and compliance needs for your backups. You can maintain backups for years if you need to, and backups are durably stored across multiple availability zones, and they're point-in-time consistent views of the data in your file system. So some of the other features that we offer when it comes to administration, and so these are all features that we've built into FSx for Windows File Server because they're features that our customers have shared with us that they rely on and that they use today on their existing file systems. So again, we want to make sure if you're moving from a file system you're running today to a managed file system in AWS that the storage solution you're moving to, for example, FSx for Windows File Server, has support for all of the features that you rely on. So some of the features that we support using a remote PowerShell interface that we've built into the product include managing the SMB file shares on your file system, enabling and taking shadow copies, enabling and configuring data deduplication. There's also a user quota feature that allows you to control the costs that can be associated with individual users. Administrators can view and modify open sessions and files on the file system. And lastly, we allow administrators to enforce encryption in transit on your file system. And so what this looks like, and this should be familiar to any Windows storage administrators in the audience, is you can connect to your file system using PowerShell. Either enter PS session or invoke command and run a specific set of commands that we've enabled for you that allow you to view what's going on in your file system and also manage certain features such as deduplication or quotas. In this screenshot over here, I'm just listing the SMB shares that are on my file system. So in terms of price performance, our customers are sharing with us that it's important to be able to optimize for either the right performance level, but also the right cost level. And so for this reason, we offer high performance SSD based storage. And coming soon, we will also be offering a lower cost HDD storage type. And what our goal here is we want to make sure that if you're running, whether it's on SSDs or HDDs today, that you can move to a solution that has a similar price and similar performance point as what you're using today. When you create a file system, you can also choose the throughput of your file system independently from the file system size, giving you an extra knob of flexibility so you can really tune your file system for the exact performance level that you need. So we talked a bit about deduplication, and with SSD and HDD, what the costs look like, taking into account deduplication. I want to walk through a really quick example of what this looks like from a TCO perspective. So in this example, let's say you have 10 terabytes worth of storage, and with deduplication, what that means is you really only need to provision about half of this because the data will be deduplicated. And so if you're looking to provision a Multieasy file system with HDD storage and a throughput capacity of 16 megabytes per second, again, you can provision your throughput capacity independently of storage. What this looks like from a total cost of ownership perspective, this overall file system comes out to about $200 per month, or about 2 cents per gigabyte per month. And depending on whether you have a requirement to take backups periodically as well, including backups, which again are stored highly durably across multiple availability zones, your total cost comes out to under $500 a month, or about 4 cents per gigabyte per month. So this is the total cost of ownership, taking into account the storage, the file server costs, all of the fully managed aspects of Amazon FSx are wrapped into these TCO numbers. Some of the other attributes when it comes to security and compliance. So on Amazon FSx, all data is encrypted at rest as well as in transit, and we now allow you to also enforce encryption in transit on your file system. File systems are, when you create a file system, you specify an Active Directory, and we fully support AD and Windows Access Control lists, so you can control which users can access the individual files on your file system. We're also integrated with Amazon VPC, so you can specify the security groups that govern access to your file system. And you can control IAM access, administrative access control, using AWS IAM. So you can control which users can create, delete file systems and backups. We're integrated with CloudTrail, so you can monitor and log the API calls done against FSx. And the service itself is PCI DSS, ISO, SOC, and GDPR compliant, as well as HIPAA eligible. So a lot of the customers we talk to have specific compliance requirements depending on the type of data they're storing on these file systems. And so we want to make sure that we can support a broad spectrum of use cases, even if you have specific requirements and specific compliance requirements. So the last part of move to managed is, how do you actually move your data wherever it may be today, whether it's in AWS on a file system you're managing or potentially on premises. So we fully support AWS Data Sync. As I mentioned, we launched an integration with them a couple months ago. fully support the use of AWS Data Sync to migrate your data easily into AWS. Data Sync is a fully managed service that makes it easy to move your data from A to B. We also support Windows native tools such as Robocopy that can do highly parallelized transfers of data. When you're moving your data to Amazon FSx, because file systems are integrated with your Active Directory, you can preserve your existing security access control lists, your existing permissions, your existing DFS namespaces, and your users can continue using your file system using their same exact user identities without you needing to worry about maintaining a separate identity store, mapping identities between your on-premises and your FSx network. It just works. And lastly, in addition to moving the data, we offer a number of tools, and you can see this in our documentation, that make it easy to move the SMB shares that are exported on your file system from one file system into another. So double-clicking really quickly on AWS Data Sync, for those of you who aren't familiar with the service. So Data Sync is a fully managed AWS service that makes it easy and efficient to transfer hundreds of terabytes and millions of files into AWS. Data Sync, it's a parallelized data transfer tool. It scales to 10 gigabits per second per agent, and you can scale out your data transfers across multiple agents. It's fully automated, so you don't have to write scripts, you don't need to do validation that your data has been copied. All of this is fully managed by the service. You can configure either a one-time migration or an ongoing transfer if you want to periodically move your data from one place to another. Data Sync itself is a service. It supports Amazon FSx for Windows File Server, but it's also a broadly flexible service within Amazon that integrates with a number of the storage services that we have. And lastly, as with many of our services, it's a secure and compliant service, meaning that you can use it to move even some of your sensitive data into AWS. So what Data Sync looks like is, and I'll do a demo of this in a minute, if you have an on-premises SMB-based file system, you essentially can create a Data Sync task that uses that file system as a source and uses your Amazon FSx file system as a destination. And that task will automatically, once you click start, it will automatically scan both locations, determine the deltas that need to move from A to B, and will automatically manage the copying of that data in a highly parallel fashion, and will manage verification of the data in the destination automatically for you. So with that, what I'm going to do is give you a quick demo of what it's like to create an Amazon FSx file system and some of the key features of using Amazon FSx. So over here on my screen, you can see this is the Amazon FSx console. And so first thing I'm going to do is go through the process of creating a file system, just to show you what the steps are, what are the required inputs, and to show really how easy it is to get started with the service. So I'm going to click Create File System. I'm going to select Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. We have two offerings today under Amazon FSx. And from here, what I can do is I can give my file system a name. I'm going to call it Webinar File System. I can select the deployment type, so whether it's a Multieasy or a single easy file system. In this case, I'll leave it at Multieasy, and I'll specify a storage capacity of 1 terabyte. Based on the storage that you select, Amazon FSx will automatically recommend a throughput capacity for your file system. As I mentioned before, you can provision the storage and the throughput of your file system independently to allow you to really cost optimize for the cost and performance that you need. In this case, I can choose the throughput that I'd like, but in this case, I'll just stick with the default recommendation. From here, I select the VPC, the AWS security groups, and the subnets in which my file system is created. As a multi-easy file system, each multi-easy file system is created in 2 subnets within your VPC, one in each availability zone. So I'm going to leave these 2 subnets as the default. Then I'm going to go and configure the Active Directory that my file system will join and use for authenticating the users who join the file system. And so if you use AWS managed Microsoft Active Directory on AWS, selecting an Active Directory is as simple as going into this dropdown and selecting your AD from the list. Alternatively, we also support you bringing your own self-managed Active Directory and using that with FSx. And so in this option, what you would do is you would provide your Active Directory domain name, the IP addresses of DNS servers that are associated with your AD, the username and password of a service account in your Active Directory, and the organizational unit in which you'd like your file system to reside, and an administrative group that you can use to delegate administrative tasks to your file system. So the last two fields are optional, but with these inputs, you can essentially configure your file system to join and be a part of your Active Directory, so you don't need to worry about managing or changing your user credentials, your user identities when you're using the file system. So in this case, I'm just going to select my managed AD because just for the sake of the demo. I can configure the encryption on my file system. Amazon FSx is integrated with AWS KMS, or Key Management Service. In this case, I'll just use the default key that's created for FSx. I can specify a backup window. So by default, each Amazon FSx file system has daily backups that are taken of that file system. And so I can specify what that window is, at what time these backups are taken. In this case, I'll just select no preference. I can select how long my automatic backups are retained for. And again, if I'm taking manual backups of my file system, we offer two modes of taking backups. Those backups can be retained for as long as you need, even years if you have requirements for that. And similarly to backups, we have a notion of a weekly maintenance window that if and when Amazon FSx needs to perform routine maintenance on your file system, for example, updating Windows or repairing degraded hardware, we will typically do this maintenance within your maintenance window. And so this is your opportunity to specify if maintenance were to occur in a given week, during what 30-minute window will that maintenance occur? And in this case, I'm going to leave it at no preference as well. So from here, I can just double check that all the inputs are correct. I'm creating a Multieasy 1 terabyte Windows file system. And from here, I click Create File System. And that's it. My file system's creating. It'll take about 10-15 minutes for it to create. And so for the rest of the demo, I'm actually going to use a file system that I created just a few minutes before the demo began. But from here in the console, you can see, I have a file system ID. I can double check my storage throughput capacity, and I can view key attributes of the file system, such as the VPC, the subnets that it's in. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to switch over to an existing file system that I created. And so the first thing that I'll do is I created two file systems before this webinar, a large file system and a small file system. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you a little bit about the performance characteristics of Amazon FSx. So with the large file system, this file system is already available, so I'm ready to connect to it. Each file system has a DNS name that you can use to mount your file system from a Windows client. So I'm going to copy this DNS name, and I'm going to then switch over to a remote desktop session. Within this remote desktop session, this is a server in my VPC that is joined to the same Active Directory as my file system. And so what I can do is I can take the DNS name from my file system, and I can actually map it on my Windows server as a letter. So in this case, I'm going to map it to a Z drive. And once that's done, as you can see here, this file system actually shows up as a Z drive on my client. You can alternatively access your file system just using the address bar by doing // your file system DNS name and selecting an SMB share name that's within the file system. So by default, when this file system is created, it's empty. I can create files, I can create folders within here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick performance test just to show you what performance looks like. So I'm going to be using a tool called disk speed, which is used commonly in the Windows space to test performance of file systems. So in this case, I'm going to first create a 1 GB file on my file system just to be used for performance testing. And as you can see here on the right, this file is created. Once this file is created, I'm then going to switch to doing a quick test of writing data to this file to see just how quickly that data can be written. So here I'm going to run a disk speed command. And what this command is going to do is, for a duration of 600 seconds, I'm going to issue random IO, so random block ranges within the file, 100% write operations. So this is going to be writing from my client to my Amazon FSx file system with 8 threads, a queue depth of 32 operations per queue, and a byte size of 1 megabyte. This SR attribute means that I'm going to be disabling caching to ensure that all of the write operations leave my client and go to my file system. So if I initiate this disk speed, if you take a look at my my performance monitor on the right, you can see that I'm currently sending about traffic at about 16 gigabits per second. In other, this is equivalent to 2 gigabytes per second of throughput. And so if I go back to my file system in AWS and I take a look at the key attributes, this file system has a throughput capacity of 2 gigabytes per second. So what this is showing is that even with a single EC2 instance with a single client, I'm able to get the full throughput capacity of my file system. And this is the result of a feature in Windows Server that Amazon FSx offers called SMB multi-channel. Multi-channel allows you to, even from a single client, when you're issuing lots of IO to a file system, the client will actually establish multiple TCP connections behind the scenes, which will allow you to scale out your throughput many times higher than what you can get from a single TCP connection. And so the fact that I'm able to drive 16 gigabits per second from a single client to my file system is a testament to that fact. If I go into the Amazon FSx console, we have a monitoring tab that you can look at that displays key file system attributes, how much storage you have, how much throughput you're driving, how many IOPS or IO operations per second you're driving. In this case, it's only been a couple minutes, so I don't have many data points, but you can see, of course, the load on the file system has increased. And so now I'm driving higher levels of throughput, higher levels of IOPS, and you can view all of this, current as well as historical, in the Amazon FSx console directly. So the other thing I'd like to show, I'm going to cancel this IO test, is some of the administrative features that we talked through earlier. So with each file system, there's a remote PowerShell endpoint that you can connect to perform certain administrative tasks on your file system. In this case, this is my PowerShell endpoint. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this endpoint. I'm going to define that as a variable in my shell. And then I'm going to run this enter PS session command, which is going to establish a remote PowerShell session to my file system. From here, I can run, for example, get command, and this shows me all of the Amazon FSx commands that we offer using our remote PowerShell interface. So these are commands around SMB shares, around deduplication, around quotas. So the first thing I'd like to show is an example of our shadow copies feature. So if I'm on my file system right now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do get command shadow. So shadow copies is the previous version feature that allows you to go back in time in your file system. So the first thing I'm going to do, again, this file system was recently created, is I'm going to enable shadow copies on my file system. So to do that, I'm going to run set FSx shadow storage command, and I'm going to just configure it with some of the default settings. So at this point, shadow copies is enabled. And if I go to list the shadow copies in my file system, you'll see there's no shadow copies taken just yet. So what I'm going to do is within the file system, I'm going to create a new text file. And I'm going to add, the content of the text file is going to be just old contents, and I'm going to save it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a shadow copy of the file system. So you can do that using new shadow copy. And also, by default, shadow copies are scheduled. So you can actually view what the schedule of shadow copies is. So for example, if I run get FSx shadow copy schedule, I can see right now I don't have a schedule configured, but I can easily configure a schedule to say, for example, shadow copies should be taken at 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. each day. So I successfully took a shadow copy of my file system. And so what does that mean? So what it means is if I go to this text file that I created, and let's say I erase the contents, or I replace old contents with new contents, and I save it. What it means is if I reopen the file, The new contents are there. I no longer can see what the old contents were. However, because a shadow copy was taken in between the old version and the new version, I can actually right-click on this file, click on Restore Previous Versions, and from here I can see the older version of this file from just 1 minute ago. And here I can either open the old version of the file, and here you'll see that the contents are old contents, or I can restore the version of the file to be the latest that's in the file system. And so in this case, if I restore the file and then I click on it, now you see that the old contents are back. So this shadow copy feature makes it really easy for users who may have accidentally deleted a file or modified a file to go back to a previous version of their file in the file system. So what I want to show you now is how easy is it to use DataSync to move data into your file system. So what I have right here is on the D drive of my client that I'm running, and this is a C5 instance in the same VPC as my file system. I have a bunch of files. This is my team's shared folder. I have about 1.5 gigabytes of files, and these are primarily Word documents, Excel files, PowerPoints, typical types of files that you and your team might be sharing amongst one another. So if I want to copy data from this file system, and again, the file system's in my VPC, but it could be on premises as well, using DataSync, what I can do is I'll go to the AWS DataSync console, and I'm going to create a new task. And with this task, the first thing I configure is a source location. And so as the location type, I'm going to select an SMB file system. I'm going to select an agent that I've already configured in my VPC. And for the SMB server, I'm going to go to the EC2 console. I'm going to find the IP address of the EC2 instance that I'm running that has the source data and paste it in here. And within this EC2 instance, I've created an SMB share on this D volume, and this share is called D. And so I'm going to ask it to copy as the source share name from this D share. I'll provide a username and password for a credential of a user that's in the Active Directory, so DataSync can authenticate to this file system. Then I'll click Next. Similarly, I want to configure the destination where I'm copying the data to. So in this case, this is going to be my Amazon FSx file system. So my file system, I'm going to copy the Windows file system ID right here. And I can select as a destination Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. I'll choose my file system, which is this file system right here. And I'll copy the data into share, which is the default SMB share that's created on Amazon FSx. I'll supply the same username and password provided to the other, to the source, because this is the same Active Directory and the same users and credentials work in both places, and click Next. Finally, I'm going to give this task a name. This is my webinar task. And just for the sake of expediency, I'm not going to have DataSync verify the data in the destination. I'm just going to do a simple integrity check while the data is transferring. And I'm going to create task. So at this point, my DataSync task is created. It's configured to copy data from my source SMB file system onto Amazon FSx. So if I go back here and I go to the Z drive, you can see the Z drive is pretty empty. There's not much in it. I have this one disk speed file and the new text document. The source, on the other hand, on the left-hand side is my team shared folder, which has about 1 gigabyte of data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Start on this task. And just click Start. And what this is going to do is DataSync now is going to initiate an execution of this task that I can see here that's configured to copy data from my self-managed SMB file share onto Amazon FSx. So again, this is fully managed by DataSync as a service. As a customer, you don't have to worry about managing the copying, about configuring a multi-threaded, multi-process copy job to do so quickly. Even though this is 1.5 gigabytes of data, the data itself can be moved pretty quickly because DataSync is, again, a highly parallel data transfer tool that really allows you to optimize performance and do your data copying quickly. So if I switch over to my file system, now you can see that within my destination, which is at the right-hand side, my team shared folder is starting to appear. And so this is all being automatically moved by DataSync. As a customer, I don't have to worry about building my own parallel data transfer techniques. All this is going on completely behind the scenes. If I go back to the data sync console, we'll see that the execution was a success. It took about 30 seconds to copy the data from my original file system onto Amazon FSx. And this data transfer occurred at a rate of about 80 files per second, or about 80, 90 megabytes per second of throughput. So again, all of this happened automatically with data sync, and this works even if your source is on premises, for example. So the last feature I'd like to show is a feature that a lot of our customers are using to optimize their costs on Amazon FSx. And this is a data deduplication feature. So as I mentioned earlier, what data deduplication allows you to do is save storage space on your file system by getting rid of duplicate contents. For example, pieces of files that have overlap. What data dedupe will do is it'll go through your file system, it'll determine if there's overlap between any of the files that are in the file system, and it will optimize to only store a single copy of any data that's overlapping. So especially with user shares and team folders, very often you'll have multiple versions of the same file or multiple edits of the same file. And so deduplication will take all of that and will reduce your storage space, so you're only storing essentially deltas between the different versions of your files. So what I'm going to do in this remote PowerShell interface is I'm going to look at all of the commands that Amazon FSx offers around data deduplication. So the first thing I'm going to do is enable deduplication, because by default it's disabled. All right, so data deduplication is now enabled. And so if I want to get the status of deduplication right now, what it's going to show is that I have nothing saved. Deduplication hasn't done anything just yet. So what I'm going to do is right now it's 11:01. I'm going to wait for it to roll over to 11:02, but I'm going to create a new scheduled task. And this task is going to run, it's going to be an optimization task that goes through the file system to determine deduplicated data. And I'm going to configure this to start at 11:03 p.m. So in about less than a minute. So I'm going to configure this now. So in a minute, what we're going to see is that my file system is going to automatically start compressing the data in the file system and freeing up storage space. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to configure deduplication to consider every file in the file system, regardless of how old it's been. By default, data deduplication will only consider files that haven't been touched for a certain amount of time. But for this use case where I'm migrating data over to the file system, a lot of these files might look new, but in reality, I might want to turn on deduplication right away. So I'm going to wait for 11:02 or 11:03 to roll over so the deduplication starts. But as a reminder, my file system right now, if I go here, it has about 23 gigabytes of storage space in it. So now it's 11:03. I can run get FSx dedupe job to see the status of the job that's running. And so right now you can see my job is running. It was scheduled to start this minute. Right now it's 0% done. It'll go pretty quickly because I only have about 1,000 files in the file system. But once it's fully done, I'm going to switch over to looking at the FSx dedupe status, so we can get a sense of how much of the data in the file system was actually deduplicated. So in this case, we can see that this deduplication job that ran, it saved us 71% of the data in the file system, which means that out of those 20 or so gigabytes worth of data, 70% of that we were able to free up by running data deduplication and freeing up save space. Now, a lot of the saved data was actually in this large diskspeed.dat file that was used by DiskSpeed because this file contains very similar data. But my team shared folder, if you just run deduplication on this folder by itself, what you'll typically see is about a 50-60% deduplication rate. So again, for general Word, Office documents, for general team folders, you'll be seeing a deduplication rate typically in that range. And so this is a really quick, simple demo to show that at this point, I'm able to save 71% of the space in my file system is now freed up and can be used to store net new data on Amazon FSx. So with that, I'm going to continue with the slides. And the last thing I wanted to show you before we part is just to share a couple of the resources that we have that can help you on your move to managed journey if you're looking at moving your data into AWS. The first is we have a number of quick starts that make it easy to get started, create a file system. We have an AWS storage blog that contains a number of articles about best practices for using the service, ways that Amazon FSx is integrated with other AWS services. As I mentioned earlier, we just last week published a blog about using Amazon FSx for Windows File Server as the shared storage for SQL Server FCI deployments. So we have a really cool blog post about that. And we also have an Amazon FSx resources page that has a link to a number of other resources that you could use. So some of the URLs for these pages are on the bottom. Feel free to peruse them, at your own convenience. So lastly, wanted to thank everyone for being here. Really appreciate your time today. Hopefully this was informative for all of you. Yeah, at this point, I think we have some time left over, so we'll open up the floor for any questions that people might have.